2016 was a pretty big year for me, and for most. Russia meddled with the US elections, Brexit referendum, terrorist attacks in Brussels, Orlando, India, Paris, Jakarta, Libya, Somalia, Turkey, Germany, Philippines. Harambe was killed, outbreak of the Zika virus, David Bowie, Carrie Fisher, and Prince died, or the artist formerly known as Prince died, or actually the artist formerly known as Prince died. At the time, 2016 was regarded by most as the worst year in modern history. The fact is, 2016 was pretty shitty for most people, and 2020 was just around the corner to make it a whole lot worse for a whole bunch more people. It's also the year my son was born, and the year I quit my job. And of course, Dark Souls 3 came in 2016. I'm not trying to say all those things are bad things, just important things. So how perfect is it that Dark Souls should enter the world at such a bleak and depressing timeline? How to describe Dark Souls though? Usually, Dark Souls is the game used to describe other things. Celeste is known as the Dark Souls of platformers. A pineapple is the Dark Souls of fruits. Dating, the Dark Souls of social interactions. But what does that mean? Because it's been so overused and basically oversimplified to just mean difficult. If something is difficult, it's the Dark Souls of its genre. But how exactly would most people describe it? Difficult? Okay. Besides difficult. Bleak. Unforgiving. Unfathomable sadness. Look, I'm not a lore nerd going around reading item descriptions and piecing together a rich tapestry of lore to greatly improve my immersion in the game, which is probably why it took me forever to kill Yarm. I generally just go through all Soulsborne games. That's the portmanteau used to describe Dark Souls, Demon Souls, and Bloodborne collectively. Although the same could be said for how I play Sekiro and Elden Ring too. So all Soulsborne, Kiro Ring, all from software games. I just go on vibes, you know? Just a general vibe of what's going on. But I've watched a few Vata videos. I'm not a complete Philistine. The overarching theme is one of sadness, melancholy, despair, and specifically in Dark Souls 3, fatigue. However, there is also a story of hope and overcoming fear. But let me pause on that for a second to do a quick idiot summary of the Dark Souls story, leaving out the stuff that complicates the story too much. And because, of course, I don't want to get the real Dark Souls fans mad. Okay, before recorded history, before anything basically, there was just fog and a bunch of ancients, dragons actually. This is the Age of Ancients. You still following? Good. Underground, a fire starts, called the First Flame, and this gets everything started. It begins the separation between light and dark, life and death. A bunch of folks grab themselves some of the flame in the form of Lord Souls. We've got Gwyn, Izalith, and Nito, while another, the Furtive Pygmy, takes the Dark Soul, which would provide hollows with humanity and essentially start the human race. Still following? No? Never mind then. Okay, fast forward. Gwyn and the others find the secret to killing the dragons and take the surface world for themselves, ushering in the Age of Fire. For the most part, things were good during this age, but over time the fire begins to fade. The lords start to panic about losing their power. Izalith tries to recreate it and fails. Gwyn eventually sacrifices his soul to the fire, which rekindles it, becoming the first Lord of Cinder. But this is only a temporary solution. This is where your character, a lowly hollow awakening in a prison cell, finally comes in with the unenviable job of rekindling the flame. Fast forward a ton, basically the entire whole first game, you get to the kiln of the First Flames, defeat Gwyn, and have the choice of either rekindling the flame to continue the Age of Fire, or letting it die out to begin the Age of Darkness. Nope. Turns out it doesn't matter what you choose because the canonical ending has someone else, if not you, rekindle the flame for the sequel, Dark Souls 2. As with most sequels, the story continues to get a tad more complicated. The world has become a lot more bleak than before, and it certainly is not a fun place to be. But essentially at the end, you're left with the same decision, whether to once again continue the Age of Fire, or let it die out and issue forth the unknown Age of Darkness. Psych again, your choices don't matter, because there's another sequel to be made. You guessed it, Dark Souls 3. By the end of the third game, the question of why are we doing this becomes even more apparent than ever before. The world is in pain. There are monsters everywhere, hardly the kind of world worth saving. And it's not a once-off thing. We have the data. We can see the trend. To reiterate, World is full of monsters. You kill Gwyn and hit reset. World is still full of monsters. Perhaps even a bit worse than the last time. And, well, maybe it's just a coincidence. Let's try again. Hit reset. Okay. Best 3 out of 5? Things seem even worse now. Even places like Anor Londo that we remember from previous games seem way, way worse now. So why do we keep relighting the fire? Why do we keep doing the same thing over and over? This is not even the same as Einstein's famous definition of insanity, to try the same thing and expect a different result. This is doing the same thing over again and things are actually getting worse every time. It's not even the same. If you decide to relight the fire at the end of Dark Souls 3, you don't even get the all-consuming blaze from the end of Dark Souls 1. You get a bunch of embers flickering, the last sparks of a dying world. Whoa! That got hella emo. I thought this video was supposed to be about hope and overcoming fears. Well, yes. At its very basic level, Dark Souls is 100% about overcoming fears, in that a large part of its DNA, its core gameplay loop, is having to overcome some of the most difficult bosses most gamers have ever experienced. Massive dragons, giant sword-wielding pups, the Olsen twins, nameless kings, shiny dancers, the camera with this piece of crap, and even the unstoppable pinwheel. Some of the most difficult and memorable experiences have come from this franchise in particular. Dark Souls is perhaps the master of exam first, lesson after. In fact, within the first few minutes of Dark Souls 1, you are faced with the nearly insurmountable task of defeating the Asylum Demon, and for most, it takes a reasonable amount of failed attempts to even realize you don't even need to fight him immediately. Whether you beat a boss on the first attempt or after days, weeks, and hundreds of tries, the idea that success is inevitable, it's just a matter of time, is what creates hope. Maybe this time. As you make that walk of shame back to the boss arena, maybe using a different build or strategy, or after spending the past 5 hours leveling up your character so you don't get one-shotted anymore. Yeah, two-shotted at worst. It's this hope that spurs on creativity, experimentation, and eventually mastery. What's interesting for me then is why the game which, over hours of gameplay, mastering your character and developing the confidence to overcome every foe in the game, then still poses us the question, are you brave enough to end the cycle? Of course I'm brave enough, right? I just beat everything in the game. Right. And why would it even be difficult? The world is clearly in a mess. This is not a place you want to keep living in. You just went through hell to get here, and now it should be pretty obvious, end the cycle. But is it really that obvious? You've just beaten everything in the game by not giving up, by enduring, and now the game asks you to have the strength not to endure anymore, but instead to abdicate? The crux of the question is when it is asked of you. You don't get to make this call at the beginning of the game as a lowly hollow wearing rags and a broken sword, whether you want to end the cycle. That would be way too easy. You don't get offered the choice to break the cycle when you're midway through, stuck on the same damn boss for the 40th time. Of course not. That would be far too simple. No. You get offered the choice to end it all when you are on top. When you are master of all. When you feel you are deserving of your place in the world. Why would you throw all this away? As a small real-life example, I remember at school, the grade 12s had special privileges, including certain areas of the school that only they could use, and even being able to punish insubordination and other infractions by younger students with corporal punishment. Seems ridiculous now, of course. They would also indoctrinate the new grade 6s with rather humiliating initiation rituals. Every year the same thing would happen. New grade 12s would have all these special privileges bestowed on them. And I remember as a grade 6 there were always conversations of how, when we get to grade 12, we're going to put an end to all these stupid initiation rituals. But every year, the cycle would continue. If you asked any grade 6 if they would get rid of initiation, they would likely do so in a heartbeat. But ask any grade 12 and the response was generally a mix of, it wasn't that bad. It's part of growing up, or screw that, now it's my turn. So why not end the cycle? Because we don't actually want the cycle to end. We just would prefer a better seat at the table. Fear of the unknown. The reason we keep relighting the fire is because no matter how evil, haunting, and filled with monsters the world is, the thought of the unknown is way scarier. But if continuing on this path is the fact, not the risk, but the inevitable fact that things will get worse, isn't it imperative that we break the cycle? Now, you can make whatever comparison you want. It could be environmental, and that if we keep on this current trajectory, the Earth will eventually become an inhospitable mess. Funnily enough, not too different from Dark Souls. Or it could be that if we continue what is certainly starting to feel a lot like endgame capitalism, that the Earth will eventually become an unaffordable mess where the poor eat the rich. Or at least for me back in 2016, it could be that continuing this soul-destroying job for another day, continuing to do the same thing every day, expecting a different outcome, was my own relighting the fire. To paraphrase the song "Every Day is Exactly the Same" by Nine Inch Nails, I could see my future because I repeat the same routine. And in that future, I could see a conversation I would one day have with my son, where I'd tell him all the vague, Disney-esque platitudes to follow his dreams and do what makes him happy. In this future conversation, he would turn back to me and ask, "Because being a department manager at an online retailer was always your dream, right, Dad?" That became the moment, right there in 2016, where I quit my job. I had no backup plan, had a baby on the way, off to step into the unknown in my own age of darkness. Look, I'm not here to tell you that you should do the same. I'm definitely not here to tell you that doing so is easy. Quitting a job really is the Dark Souls of career moves. I'm just here to say that in the spirit of Souls games, that no matter how bleak, scary, and insurmountable the odds feel at times, that success is inevitable. Just hold on, endure, maybe this time, but know when the time is right to be able to abdicate, break the cycle, and not to fear the darkness.